Chapter 131, Some rejoice and some worry. The dark forest was now covered by a thick layer of snow. Han Sha-o sloshed his way through it as he made his way towards the dwarf village. The dwarves had been forced to leave their village because of the forest trolls. Although Han Sha-o vaguely knew where they'd relocated to with the help of the original demons, but he wasn't quite sure where exactly they had gone either. Such a long period of time. The forest trolls had left long ago and hadn't reappeared. Han Sha-o felt that the dwarves wouldn't necessarily be willing to give up their old village, so he still decided to head in that direction first. When Han Sha-o arrived at the passageway into the village and looked around, a smile blossomed from the corner of his mouth. From the various concealments and setup of things around the passageway, Han Sha-o could ascertain that the dwarves hadn't left. Han Sha-o whistled long and loudly, shaking the accumulated snow off the tree branches. His sensitive ears heard the sound of approaching footsteps as several dwarf warriors holding battle axes appeared after a short while, approaching from afar with looks of caution on their faces. "Don't worry, it's just me. I've returned as promised," Han Sha-o immediately called out before the dwarf warriors had gotten close to him. The dwarf warriors in the distance all heaved involuntary sighs of relief when they heard Han Sha-o's voice. When they walked to Han Sha-o, one of them said, "Many things have been difficult now that winter has arrived. Although the village has been exposed, we are unable to build suitable houses in such a short amount of time, so although we knew of the potential for danger here, we still didn't want to suffer in the cold and return to the village. Winter is here, so I've come this time to bring some winter rations and thick clothing for you. In addition, you can be at ease about the forest trolls. They won't ever bother you again." Han Sha-o smiled slightly and comforted the dwarves. The dwarves immediately cheered when they heard this. Their expressions were bafflingly overjoyed and filled with sincere delight and celebration. "This is wonderful. We've gone through most of the rations you brought last time in recent days. The chief thought something had happened to you because you hadn't appeared in a long time, but we also didn't know how to help you, so we could only worry about you. It's wonderful that you came. Let's hurry and enter to village to tell the good news to everyone." The dwarf that had spoken before spoke joyfully as his short stout legs moved forward rapidly, moving towards the depths of the village. When they heard that Han Sha-o had come, all the dwarves that had been warming themselves up indoors out of the frosty winter weather squirmed out one by one to give Han Sha-o friendly greetings. "Oh, it's fantastic that you're all right, Han. We were very worried about you." The dwarf warrior Bennett spoke with a look of surprise. Han Sha-o didn't say much and proceeded to an area with flat ground that had been cleared of snow. He then took out the rations and daily necessities from his space ring with a smile. He laid them all out and gathered them into piles covering a large area. "These are the rations and necessities that I've brought with me this time, along with some thick clothes to help you guys keep warm this winter. In addition, you won't have to worry about the forest trolls making trouble for you in the future. You can live here in peace and without worry. The forest trolls won't be making any trouble for you in the future," Han Sha-o explained as he observed the dwarves' delight. He felt that his actions had resulted in a proper reaction. All the dwarves were beyond themselves with glee when they saw the ground covered with rations and daily necessities. Even the female dwarves, children and elderly hiding in the houses, came out when they heard the news and started cheering in the distance. "Thank you so much, Han. If it wasn't for your rations and necessities, I think many of us would starve and freeze to death this winter. These rations and clothes are enough for us to make it through the winter." "How can we thank you?" Chief Darwin genuflected to Han Sha-o in the great gesture of the dwarves and spoke with great gratitude. "We're friends, so say nothing of gratitude," Han Sha-o responded. "To be honest, these rations and clothes weren't worth much money at all, but it was a bit difficult for merchants to transport them over. Therefore, after entering the dark forest, whether it was the forest trolls, dwarves or other species, all would be willing to pay a high price in exchange for rations and daily necessities. However, with the transportation matrix in the cemetery of death and the large capacity of the space ring, this task that would have taken a lot of people and resources to achieve was easily accomplished by Han Sha-o with no difficulty at all." "Han, you said that the forest trolls would no longer bother us. Is it because the elves have already waged war against them and completely destroyed them?" The dwarf warrior Bennett thought of another matter and asked Han Sha-o with great excitement. When he asked this question, Han Sha-o suddenly started and asked Bennett, "Can it be that the elves are already planning on waging a huge battle against the forest trolls?" Nodding, Bennett spoke angrily, "Indeed. They've even invited us and said that they want to give those wicked robbers a harsh lesson. But the defensive capabilities of our village are too weak and the chief isn't planning on having us participate. Isn't it the elves that created this situation where the forest trolls won't invade us again? Of course not. The scourge of the forest trolls will slowly be restrained in the future. Be at peace. Alright. I still have some things to do and I'll come find you again in the future. Han Sha-O spoke. He then spoke a few random words and hurriedly left the village despite the dwarves' efforts to keep him. Bennett said that the elves were going to wage war on the forest trolls. Han Sha-O couldn't sit still after he heard that. If it was before, he would have wanted the elves to wipe the floor with the forest trolls. But now the forest trolls were absolutely under his control and could even be labeled as his private army. In addition, he needed the forest trolls to cooperate with Emily's mission. If the elves stirred up trouble now, that would be quite an inconvenient timing to choose. Except many days were necessary to travel from here to the forest trolls' stronghold. Han Sha-O had many things he still had to take care of in the Empire and he really couldn't spare the time. This gave him a bit of a headache. After thinking carefully, Han Sha-O felt that there was no particular rush for things either. He'd only be delaying things by a day or two if he settled Phoebe's matters first and accompanied her to a banquet, then head for the forest trolls afterwards. The elves making a move against the forest trolls may not take place in these couple of days. Besides, although the elves were strong, the forest trolls were no pushover either. After so many years of conflict, the fact that the elves had not wrung any major concessions out of the forest trolls had already illustrated how things stood. When the sky was dark, Han Sha-O made use of the darkness, silence to hurry back to the cemetery of death. He was in no hurry to leave immediately, so he took out a fruit of Dagmar again and endured exceedingly painful torture within the cemetery of death, digesting the fruit of Dagmar like last time and once again opening up parts of his brain. When Han Sha-O felt that his body had recovered and was reborn once again, the clarity of his five senses had taken another leap forward, while the concentration speed of his mental strength and the circulation speed of his magical yuan had also all improved. Han Sha-O could vaguely feel that there were signs of him breaking through the molded spirit realm. It looked like he'd be able to progress to the next level of demonic magic before long. The next stage would be the true demon realm. Once he entered this realm, Han Sha-O would become an infant demon, truly becoming a demon in definition. The previous three stages of solid realm, open passages and molded spirit, were just to reinforce one's foundations for demonic magic. Before one became an infant demon, a practitioner didn't really count as a demonic practitioner. Only after he entered the true demon realm will Han Sha-O truly be considered as someone who has entered the halls of demonic magic. As an infant demon, he'd be able to fly through the air and use magical yuan to refine magical treasures. He'd be able to reforge the Demon Slayer Edge all over again and could train in various other amazingly powerful magics. He'd even be able to refine the unit demons that were a step above the original demons. In other words, the true demon realm was a boundary. Han Sha-O would have many ways to improve his strength after reaching this realm. His strength would once again take great leaps forward, so Han Sha-O was filled with indescribable joy when he vaguely felt that he was exhibiting signs of breaking through. By now it was morning the next day and Han Sha-O didn't remain here. He used the transportation matrix in the cemetery of death to return to the Empire and walked directly back to the academy. After the ambiguous conversation with Fanny, Han Sha-O's heart was filled with boundless expectations. Although Fanny hadn't immediately agreed to his pursuit, he basically understood Fanny's heart. He understood that if he advanced one step further, attained the level of adept mage and graduated from the academy, he'd be able to capture the teacher's heart. He was still a bit unclear on some parts of the new magics and more technical terms, so he had to inquire Fanny. Therefore Han Sha-O still needed Fanny's guidance in this stage. Once he returned to the academy and made his way to the necromancy major, he suddenly realized that he'd become a celebrity when he bumped into students from other majors along the way. The gazes that other people used to use when looking at him were filled with surprise and admiration, with some pretty female students even revealing the light of romantic interest in their eyes. This kind of attention hugely satisfied Han Sha-O's vanity. He was in quite a good mood all along the way. When he saw the attention and feelings from the pretty girls, Han Sha-O even gave them friendly greetings, displaying a brilliant smile. These female students immediately ran away with short strides and reddened faces. However, Once Han Sha-oh passed by the training fields, his good mood was immediately shattered. The smile on his face was replaced with a darkened look. Earthrider Knight Clark was standing in front of the doors of one of the necromancy major's training fields, wearing a form-fitting shirt and holding a large bouquet of fresh flowers in his hand. He was looking inside with a faint smile. Passing through the open door, Han Sha-oh saw that Fanny was explaining some magical theory to some necromancy students with a smile on her face. Judging from her demeanor, she wasn't affected by Clark, nor did she look at Clark at all. She was practically ignoring Clark's existence. Even so, Han Sha-oh still felt ticked off by seeing Clark stand there looking soulfully at Fanny. As he took large strides to the doors of the training grounds, he suddenly darted forward and purposely exerted pressure with his right shoulder after tilting his body, scattering the bouquet of fresh flowers all over the floor. Han Sha-oh had purposely lightened his footfalls in his movements just now, accelerating only when he'd walked up to Clark. Engrossed in watching Fanny, Clark had been caught off guard and reacted too late. It was a bit comical how broken and scattered his bouquet was now. "Oh, I'm sorry, so sorry. It's just that these are the training fields for the necromancy major and I bumped into you by accident because you were blocking the door." Han Sha-oh immediately appeared apologetic when he saw Clark spitting fire with his eyes and staring at him. "Oh Brian, what are you doing here in the training fields today?" When Fanny saw that Han Sha-oh had come, her beautiful eyes immediately brightened and her whole face glowed with health. She indicated for Han Sha-oh to hurry up and come inside. Han Sha-oh was somewhat mollified by Fanny's reaction, but Clark's existence still irked Han Sha-oh, and so his facial expression was a bit ugly. He looked at Fanny and then looked at the fresh flowers in Clark's hands. He spoke with a voice dripping with acid. "Just who is the noble knight Clark waiting here for with flowers in his hand?" Fanny started and rolled her eyes bad-temperedly at Han Sha-oh. She then walked over as if expressing her stance, speaking a bit coldly to Clark. "Mr. Clark, I think I've been clear enough. I only want to teach in peace and hope that you'll stop bothering me. In addition, your status is noble and lofty. I don't want to be embroiled in any unnecessary trouble with you. I think you probably understand what I mean." Fanny's words were for Clark but also for Han Sha-oh. They were an obvious refusal of Clark's pursuit and a subtle indication to Han Sha-oh of her own attitude, also telling him to relax and not to think too much. Thus, when these words came from Fanny's mouth, Clark's face immediately dulled and became dejected, whereas Han Sha-oh felt damn good and had smiles reappear on his face again. Clark nodded his head, hugely depressed and slowly. He took the destitute flowers and departed from the training fields with a downcast face, not saying a single word further. "Are you satisfied now?" Reaching out a hand to pinch Han Sha-oh, Fanny said viciously, "How dare you not believe me?" "Ouch, that hurts. I believe you, I believe you." Han Sha-oh felt like he was on cloud nine as he pretended to be in pain. Chapter 132, Abnormalities in the Night. "Master Fanny and Brian, what are the two of you doing?" Lisa called out from behind them, looking at both of them suspiciously. "No, nothing." Fanny glared at Han Sha-oh and pointed her finger in the direction of her lab, turning and walking inside afterwards. When she reached out her hand, the space ring that Han Sha-oh had given her was displayed very prominently on her hand. Han Sha-oh was filled with joy after taking only one glance at it. He knew that Fanny had already accepted the ring. She was pointing in the direction to the lab, obviously telling him to wait for her there. He hadn't planned on lingering anyways, and he smiled foolishly as he nodded at Fanny. He then left on his own accord and walked to her lab. After waiting there for a while, Fanny returned to the lab after ending her class in the training field. She opened the door to let Han Sha-oh in and asked him with her usual expression, "All right, what do you want?" Although Fanny was acting normally, both of them knew that their relationship had undergone a subtle shift. It was basically impossible for Fanny to maintain the dignity of a teacher in front of Han Sha-oh now. Grinning cheekily at Fanny, Han Sha-oh smirked. "Don't be so serious." Rolling her eyes bad-temperedly at Han Sha-oh, Fanny said, "I need to be serious towards you. Otherwise you shine so radiantly. If I give you the slightest bit of warmth and your hands and feet become naughty." How were these ambiguous tones those of a teacher to a student? It was practically a flirtatious spy play between lovers. Han Sha-oh still felt content at heart even when Fanny was glaring at him. Although he was delighted Han Sha-oh's willpowers had gone through much tempering and he wasn't someone who didn't know what was truly important. He stilled for a moment, then started asking Fanny about all the difficulties in magical theory he'd run into lately. When she saw that Han Shao was raising questions, Fanny also turned solemn as she regained her attitude as a teacher. She carefully explained all the theories and detailed out all the theories for Han Shao. When she saw how hard-working Han Shao was and that he could even use the journeyman magic of Bone Prison, now Fanny was happier than even Han Shao. She sighed after a while. With your abilities, it looks like you'll be able to progress to Adept Mage before too long. I have to think for a moment before answering the questions you're asking now and can't just answer off the cuff like I did before. It looks like I'll be unable to teach you before long. A good student would impart onto the teacher an incomparable sense of achievement. But because Han Shao had truly progressed too quickly, this gave Fanny some pressure. She was only an Adept Mage after all and was only one level higher than Han Shao now. According to the divisions of power and levels, Han Shao's rate of improvement was beyond her imagination. If things progressed at the current rate, Fanny would make a weaker and weaker impact on Han Shao. This made it difficult for Fanny to bear when this feeling permeated her heart, but she was still rather resigned to it. Hey, no matter what, you're always going to be the master Fanny who brought me in and set me on the right path. Even if our relationship changes in the future, your identity as my teacher will never change. Han Shao's brain was working quite fast at the moment, and he could more or less guess her current thoughts based on the changes in her expression. He immediately spoke to her with a smile, shaking her head with a slight sigh. Fanny's beautiful brows immediately creased and she spoke in a worried tone. Our Babylon Academy only has Jean and I as the two teachers in the Necromancy major. We're only Adept Mages. When you learn all of our knowledge and have no one to teach you, then your rate of improvement will surely face obstacles. I'm most worried about this. You're thinking too much. When that day truly arrives, there may even be an even better way to resolve things. You don't need to worry that much at this time. Han Shao could clearly feel Fanny's concern for him. However, with the existence of the Cemetery of Death, Han Shao believed that as his strength improved, he'd be able to make it into the further depths of the Cemetery of Death. He could vaguely feel that the inner depths of the Cemetery of Death would have ways to help him become even stronger. Fanny seemed to think things through with Han Shao's speech, and she nodded with a smile. Perhaps you're right, I am indeed thinking too much. Alright, it's getting late. Go practice magic if you have nothing else. I'm going to go get dinner as well. How about if we go to dinner together? Han Shao's heart lurched as he offered this naughty suggestion. Humphrey, dream on. I will have nothing to do with you before you become an Adept Mage. Hurry and leave now. You're never up to any good if you stay here. Fanny smiled and waved a magic staff in her hand, trying to get Han Shao to leave. Han Shao was in no rush either, as he yelped accordingly and backed up towards the door. Just as he was about to be swept out of the lab, he suddenly moved like a flash of lightning and kissed Fanny, laughing merrily as he made his escape amidst Fanny's embarrassment. Darned kid, I'll get you one day, Fanny said huffily as she slammed the lab door closed with an audible clang. At this moment something registered in Han Shao's mind as he suddenly heard a low panting sound. 3 original demons suddenly flew out without a sound and floated towards the origin of the sound. Earth Rider Clark was hiding by a fence post in the distance, his originally handsome features distorted by anger. He was staring at Han Shao with a look of hatred, and Han Shao was quite familiar with that kind of look. That was how Fitch had been looking at him before he'd taken his revenge. His heart chilled. Han Shao suddenly felt that this was a bit tricky. Clark was an Earth Rider, and Han Shao had witnessed the might of his strength before. Although Han Shao's strength had taken great leaps forward, he was well aware of his limits and knew that he absolutely couldn't take Clark on alone. It was a bit difficult to be hated by such a character. Privately weighing up solutions to take care of him, Han Shao walked slowly towards the dorm. The Earth Rider Clark was following close behind him, leaving silently only after Han Shao walked into the dorm. Through his observation via the original demons, Han Shao could clearly see the expression on Clark's face and knew that Clark wouldn't take things lying down. With his strength as an Earth Rider and the methods he displayed in the Dark Forest, Han Shao believed that if Clark were to make a move against Han Shao, he wouldn't try hidden subterfuge like that kid Fitch. It was likely that Clark would bring about an attack as indomitable as a thunderbolt once he commenced and would absolutely give him no chance to come back. With Clark's strength and confidence, he would never leave anyone alive. Clark and Claude were brothers, so their personalities were exceedingly similar. They were both people who appeared forthright and full of sunshine on the surface, but were characters that were filled with darkness inside. Han Shao had long since discerned this point and thus been privately on guard against them. Han Shao didn't linger in the dorm that night, but rather hid himself in the old warehouse, placing one original demon in the dorm. He wanted to see if Clark would take advantage of this opportunity to bring about a devastating blow to himself. The warehouse was as messy and dirty as usual, as all sorts of useless items were shoved within only to be cleaned in the morning by Borg and Carrie. Now that Han Shao was tall, muscular, and more than double his original size, the warehouse was a bit of a tight fit for him, but for security concerns he still had to do so. When all was quiet in the dead of night, Han Shao meditated silently to concentrate his mental strength. As he remained alert mentally, his entire body seemed to melt with the color of the night. His breathing and heartbeat decreased at an astonishing pace. If it wasn't for the fact that heat remained within his body, bystanders would have thought he was a dead man. The speed of his meditations was much faster than it had previously been. Although Han Shao had been mentally prepared for this phenomenon, when he felt the concentration speed of his mental strength was much faster than before, and that his mental strength was replenishing at a flabbergasting pace, he finally understood that the level of his mental strength training had surely outstripped ordinary mages. After who knew how long, when the frosty night was about to pass, the original demons finally discovered Clark's body just when Han Shao felt that he'd overreacted and Clark wouldn't come by. In stark contrast to the dark mantle or any other night stalker, Clark didn't conceal himself at all. He still wore the clothes that he had worn during the day, but his face appeared a bit overcast. He strode in from afar and didn't arouse anyone's attentions. When he arrived at the window of the room Han Shao lived in, Clark dashed forward and leapt upwards, flying through the air, and landed adroitly in Han Shao's room. Although I don't have concrete proof, the disappearance of my younger brother Claude must surely have something to do with you. Don't think that I'm too harsh, it's that you're simply too irritating. You'll vanish after today, and Fanny will never find traces of you even if she searches. Clark muttered to himself after landing through the window and surged forward like lightning, stabbing downwards with his sword. Han Shao had used some of the pillows in the closet to set up his bed and made it seem like someone was sleeping there. Therefore, when Clark stabbed downwards and even made a faint sound ring out with his sword, it gave him a feeling that something was amiss. Clark pulled back the blanket to see that there were only pillows inside. His face changed slightly. He stared off into space for only a moment and immediately put things back as they were. He retreated from the room like lightning and seemed to plan to return along the way he came. Just as this moment, the original demons patrolling the area suddenly felt another person's presence approaching. This person was like a shadow in the night, his body almost glued to the wall of the classroom building and observing Clark's actions from afar. Han Shao had thought that this person was in cahoots with Clark, but when the person followed surreptitiously behind Clark after he left, Han Shao immediately understood that this fellow's target should be Clark. He was greatly startled, as he hadn't thought so many random bizarre matters would take place in the academy. As he saw Clark and that person run in the direction of the night school, Han Shao was deathly afraid that the original demons wouldn't be able to see everything clearly because they needed to keep a distance. He immediately dashed out of the warehouse and kept an exceedingly large distance between the two, observing them through the original demons. When the original demon followed them back to the night school, Han Shao discovered that Clark entered one of the rooms and sat there without speaking. This room was where Clark had once spoken to Duke. It seemed like this was where Clark lived now. The shadow that had been following Clark made its way here and stood for a while in the distance after seeing Clark enter a room. He then made his way soundlessly in another direction in the night school. He sent an original demon to remain within Clark's room and had another keep watch on the surroundings. The third original demon followed that shadow, trying to glean more information about it. After a short while, the shadow made its way to an isolated room in the night school, lifted up the few tiles on the roof and bounded into the room from above. "You've come back." Lawrence was sitting in the dim room and holding a cup of hot tea in his hand, speaking faintly to the shadow that had landed from the roof. Han Sha-oh was greatly astonished. He hadn't thought that the Shadow's final destination would be Lawrence's room. As the son of a great finance minister in the Empire, Lawrence had actually bought black iron ore from him a while back. Han Sha-oh had even sparred with Lawrence and had some goodwill towards this person. To think that he'd sent someone to follow Clark. Han Sha-oh suddenly thought of Candide's words to him the first time he'd arrived in the Dark Mantle. Candide had said that Lawrence's identity was uncommon and had reminded him that if Han Sha-oh walked too closely with Lawrence it could result in attracting an enormous amount of trouble. Candide had wanted to speak further about Lawrence's identity but didn't say more. When Han Sha-oh saw this scene he immediately understood that Lawrence's identity wasn't as simple as merely the son of a great finance minister. The son of a finance minister wouldn't warrant such a reminder from one of the three heavyweights of the Dark Mantle. Yes, Clark went to the necromancy dorms after leaving his room and darted into one of the rooms. He seemed to want to kill one of the students. However, I saw him walk out with a dejected look on his face and didn't hear any sounds of fighting. He likely didn't find who he was looking for. The shadowy figure responded. Lawrence was suddenly interested as he looked at the shadowy figure. Oh, that's a bit odd. Right, tell me, which room did Clark enter? When the shadow described the location of Han Sha-oh's room, Lawrence was taken aback and then smiled mysteriously, so he'd wanted to make a move against Brian. Hey, this is interesting. Quite interesting indeed. It looks like I need to sit Brian down for a good conversation. Chapter 133. I want to kill him too. He's just a necromancy major student. Is he really worth that much attention from you? The shadow spoke in surprise. Hey, he's not ordinary. There's many mysteries surrounding him and even I can't figure out what secrets he holds now. This person is quite interesting. Lawrence spoke slowly with a smile. The goal of Clark's visit to the night school should be you this time. Most likely he and that Duke from the Casey Empire wanted to make a move against you, but for some reason their mission was aborted halfway through and Duke suddenly left our country. This entire matter is very bizarre. The man continued his report. Nodding his head and remaining silent for a while, Lawrence opened his mouth to say, alright, you are dismissed for now. It's not that easy for Clark to make a move against me in the night school anyway. It looks like I need to move first and eliminate Clark. The shadow didn't say much when he heard those words and jumped up onto the roof, squirming out from a hole beneath the roof. He vanished into the distance as Lawrence sat inside silently sipping his tea and contemplating something. The sky had already brightened at this point as the figure left and flew towards the mountains behind the academy, walking even further out. Han Sha-oh couldn't blatantly continue his pursuit either because of the lightened sky. Add to that the matters of today, Han Sha-oh decided to momentarily give up on investigating that fellow. Making use of the time before the students of the night school had awoken, Han Sha-oh returned to the necromancy major early in the morning. He spent the morning alone in the dorm practicing necromancy magic as usual and silently contemplating Lawrence's identity and his relationship with Clark. Han Sha-oh moved to the academy's cafeteria for the first time at noon, resulting in a small riot. Each major of the academy had their own independent cafeteria. The dark major was no exception either. The cafeteria was divided into two, with the lower level being completely free. Students were free to partake after turning in their tuition fees, but of course what was free nationally didn't taste that good. There was another level upstairs that many chefs were in charge of. Its level was much higher than the one beneath it. Of course the food on this level could only be enjoyed by spending additional gold coins. It was usually for students who were more well off. Han Sha-oh was no longer a poverty-stricken scholar. There were enough gold coins stored in the crystal cards that were in his space ring for him to enjoy life as he would. Therefore he didn't linger on the first level, went directly to the second. He swiped his crystal card to order a few expensive and exquisite dishes. He took a table for himself and started pigging out. After last time's battle, Han Sha-oh had become a celebrity in the school. Those enjoying their meals were now all dark major students. Although Han Sha-oh had gained glory for the dark major last time, his actions hadn't won respect for the dark major. Rather, he had thrown dirt in their faces. So when he appeared on the second level of the cafeteria, he had attracted everyone's attentions. Han Sha-oh paid no attention to any of this. As his strength and breadth of experience grew, he slowly paid less and less attention to these Babylon Academy students. In his heart, these students were only kids who'd never seen the outside world, so they posed no threat to him. So there you are. Lisa exclaimed softly as she and Lawrence walked through the door. She smiled and walked over to Han Shao with Lawrence. Lawrence smiled and nodded at Han Shao from afar, then he went off to order his own food. Lisa sat down peremptorily in front of Han Shao and she looked at the looks full of hostility around her. Her charming face chilled as she stuck her hands on her waist. And just what are you looking at? What is there to look at here? Although the little witch Lisa was in the weak necromancy major, her bad temper was renowned throughout the entire dark major. Therefore when she yelled, those glaring at Han Shao had their expressions turn ugly and they ducked their heads muttering a few curses and then turned their heads again. Pay no attention to them, they're just jealous of you. Looking around her and cursing angrily, Lisa sat down merrily and stared at Han Shao. At a loss for words internally, Han Shao said, then just let them be jealous. I won't lose any hair over their jealousy, but if anyone dares materialize their jealousy into action, then I can promise that they won't only be short of hairs. Han Shao had spoken softly in the beginning, but when he noticed that there were still people staring at him in hatred, he raised his voice with a cold face, filling it with a warning tone. Han Shao hadn't dealt killing blows in last time's combat display, but the cold remoteness and resolution had already told everyone that he was absolutely not someone who was kind-hearted and would show mercy. The bystanders then had even had the strange impression that if it weren't for school rules, Han Shao might very well have truly coldly killed those people. Therefore when Han Shao issued those warnings with an angry face, those who hadn't lowered their hostile gazes after Lisa's hectoring slowly ducked their heads in the end. Hey, it looks like you're quite unpopular. Lawrence walked over from afar as he carried a tray of exquisite food. He sat down across from Han Shao with a smile next to Lisa after giving a plate to her. Shrugging, Han Shao said diffidently, the key thing is that some people are truly too bored. They're incompetent but have a strong sense of jealousy. Not only will they not be grateful if you show them a friendly face, but they'll think you fear them instead. Indeed, I deeply empathize with your perspective. Lawrence chucked in agreement and nodded his head to say so. Amy and Athena, the two girls from the necromancy major, suddenly appeared at this time. When Lisa saw the two take another seat, she hesitated and then picked up her plate. You guys chat, I'll go sit with Amy and the others. Lisa stood up after she spoke and made her way down two walkways, greeting Amy and the others in the distance, and sat down with them. Han Shao and Lawrence were the only ones left after Lisa's departure. Because of Lisa and Han Shao's repeated warnings just now, there was a large area of free space around Han Shao. Therefore no one should be able to listen in on their conversation. I've heard that Clark likes Fanny, but he left with a face full of dejected failure today because of your appearance. Did such a thing happen? Lawrence seemed to ask randomly with a slight smile. Han Shao was frantically going over things at this moment in his heart. He lifted his head to rake a glance over Lawrence and responded with seeming indifference. How could such a thing have happened? Master Fanny turned down Clark because she wasn't interested in him. This had nothing to do with me. Don't you go sprouting random nonsense. Lawrence's expression abruptly turned normal after Han Shao's words, and he then spoke merrily. Brian O'Brien, we're friends. Do you want to lie to me? Rumors of the matter between you and Master Fanny is all over the Dark Major. They say that nothing comes from nothing. I for one don't believe that there's nothing between the two of you. Say whatever you want to say. Han Shao declined to comment. He lowered his head and continued eating, seeming to not mind Lawrence's words at all. I happen to know a bit about Clark's personality. He's not as just and kind as he appears on the surface. It looks like you've offended him. I've also heard that he suspects that you killed his little brother. It looks like you're in a spot of trouble. Lawrence continued to speak and used his eyes to silently observe Han Shao's expression. When he saw that Han Shao was completely unmoved, Lawrence remained silent for a bit and continued to speak. Brian, we're friends, right? Nodding, Han Shao put down his cup and looked at Lawrence with a smile. I'd say so. Then all right. Since this is the case, I'm willing to bet that Clark will definitely make a move against you. I hope you believe me. Lawrence spoke seriously. Of course, when I returned to the dorms today, I saw that the blanket on my bed had traces of it being sliced open. It was a good thing that I wasn't in the dorms yesterday, otherwise you likely wouldn't have seen me today. I thought for a bit and felt that only Clark would want to act like this towards me. Lawrence had beat around the bush and said so much. His aims were slowly revealing themselves. Thus, Han Sha-oh knew what Lawrence was trying to do and stopped talking in circles, directly admitting to things. When these words were spoken, Lawrence's eyes lit up and he stared at Han Sha-oh in astonishment. He then flashed a brilliant smile and nodded. "You're not a simple character at all, so you've been prepared in advance. And to think that I've been worried for you. Since you treat me as a friend, I can actually help you take Clark down." These words were the main point. A glimpse of astonishment flashed through Han Sha-oh's eyes as he took a deep look at Lawrence. He lowered his head and spoke lowly. "You mean to say you'll team up with me to kill Clark?" A prickle of fright rippled through Lawrence as he was shocked. He looked around and said lowly, "Brian, what makes you think that?" Han Sha-oh stared at Lawrence, pausing for a bit. When he'd stared at Lawrence so that he caused the hairs on the back of the latter's neck to stand up, he spoke lowly. "Lawrence, when you spoke of handling Clark just now, I could feel your killing intent. I can be certain that you also have these sort of thoughts too, right?" It was Lawrence's turn to become silent after these words were spoken. It was like he was meeting Han Sha-oh for the first time. Lawrence looked at Han Sha-oh with an odd look on his face and was silent for a long while before nodding. He sighed. "Brian, I bow to your knowledge." "That's right, I want to kill him too." "This isn't a place to talk. I have some things to do today. Come find me tomorrow afternoon. Perhaps we can come up with a good plan." When Lawrence also spoke of his desire to kill Clark, Han Sha-oh suddenly didn't look at Lawrence anymore. He lowered his head and ate nonchalantly, speaking lowly as he did so. Also similarly silent, Lawrence and Han Sha-oh sat across from each other and ate with lowered heads. They didn't speak anymore and didn't raise their heads to look at each other again. Maintaining this bizarre situation for a while, Han Sha-oh stood up after walking outside with leisurely and unhurried strides. When Han Sha-oh was about to walk out of the cafeteria, that was when Lawrence suddenly raised his head and looked intently at Han Sha-oh's back, speaking in a voice audible only to him. "What a frightening fellow." When he left the cafeteria, Han Sha-oh dwelled no more on what had happened. He left through the mountains to the back of the academy and hired a carriage when no one was looking, heading for the Boost Merchant Guild. This was the day that Han Sha-oh had set an appointment with Phoebe. The materials needed to refine the Earth Elite zombies and the Forest Trolls rations still needed to be done through Phoebe. Han Sha-oh was also starting to make preparations to refine the unit demons that were a step higher than the original demons after advancing to the true demon stage. Han Sha-oh had also discovered a place of extreme wood in the sacred ground of the Forest Trolls. This way he could also refine the Wood Elite zombies and would have to trouble Phoebe for more materials. When he arrived at the guild, Han Sha-oh learned from Fabian that Phoebe had yet to return. Phoebe had left instructions with Fabian that if Han Sha-oh swung by to have him wait for a bit, she would return later in the evening. Seeing that the night was still young, Han Sha-oh had Fabian lead the way to catch up with Jack. When Jack heard that Han Sha-oh had arrived, he was also delighted. He found an empty place for the two of them and they began chatting happily. Han Sha-oh learned from Jack that Phoebe quite valued him due to Han Sha-oh's recommendation. Jack was apprenticing beneath the best teacher in the guild, learning how to keep the books and knowledge of how to operate a business. It looked like Phoebe was planning on cultivating Jack into someone of Fabian's status. Phoebe finally returned when it was night and spoke immediately when she saw Han Sha-oh. "I've been busy all afternoon and made evening wear for you. Come with me to my room and change into it. Let me see if you fits you well." When Phoebe said that she had spent all afternoon to make evening wear for him, Han Sha-oh felt something odd stir in his heart. His heart lurched as he ambled confusedly after Phoebe, following her to her room. Chapter 134. An awkward encounter. They entered Phoebe's room and stopped in front of an enormous mirror. Phoebe then stopped by a pile of black evening wear hemmed with exquisite rolled gold edges that included a full set of boots and undergarments. "Change out of your clothes first and I'll help you with the exterior wear in a moment." Phoebe left after handing the pile of clothes to Han Sha-oh and went to wait outside. Han Sha-oh looked at the dress, shirt, boots and bow tie with an aggrieved look. He hesitated, then followed Phoebe's request anyway and put them on. He looked at himself in the mirror and felt that he'd noticeably become more vigorous and handsome. "Are you done yet?" Phoebe asked outside. Yes, I'm done, Han Shao responded. When she heard Han Shao's response, Phoebe walked in from outside and looked Han Shao up and down with her clear eyes. She nodded. It fits you very well. You look quite dashing in these clothes. Oh, is that so? I feel quite good as well. Han Shao smiled faintly with a careless response. I'll help you with the outer jacket. Phoebe walked next to Han Shao and picked up the jacket in Han Shao's hands with ease. She didn't wait for Han Shao to speak and took the initiative to help Han Shao into the jacket, her expression quite happy. The two of them were close to each other as the faint fragrance wreathed around Phoebe wafted into Han Shao's mouth and nose. Add to that Phoebe's indescribably tender movements. This all made Han Shao's face flush and heart race. After Phoebe had helped Han Shao into all pieces of his evening wear and helped him tie his tie, Phoebe took a small step backwards and focused her sparkling beautiful eyes on Han Shao, taking a deep look. I hadn't thought that you were so fit. This set of formal wear appears to be quite form-fitting on you. Phoebe breathed softly with some surprise as she looked attentively at Han Shao. Then did you finish what I asked you to do? Han Shao finally couldn't help but ask what he cared most about after holding in his words until now. She rolled her eyes ill-temperedly at Han Shao, saying unhappily, can we not talk about your business for now and talk about them after the banquet ends? Han Shao hadn't thought that his careless question would incur Phoebe's unhappiness. He thought privately that a woman's heart is difficult to guess. All right. He was asking someone else for a favor and so could only nod his head with a rueful smile. All right. Don't give me that unwilling and reluctant look. I promise you that as long as you accompany me to the banquet and back, you'll leave the guild satisfied, Phoebe said when she saw that Han Shao was sporting a wry grin. She then told him to wait for her for a bit and turned to walk into her room. After the sounds of rifling through clothing, a stunning Phoebe dressed in a simple elegant pale blue dress with faint powder on appeared in front of Han Shao. The unadorned elegant pale blue dress tapered into a thin waist from the torso, fully offsetting the perfect curves of her chest and thin waist. The skirt that began around her lower body rippled like petals of beautiful flowers. It was as if waves were lapping when she walked. Her gorgeous cheeks were even more mesmerizing due to the presence of light makeup. Han Shao was flabbergasted in the moment he saw her. What's wrong? Why are you looking at me in such a silly fashion? Phoebe appeared a bit proud as she threw back her head a little arrogantly and asked Han Shao. No, nothing. Han Shao's lips were a bit dry and responded after swallowing some saliva. Laughing lightly, Phoebe lifted her head and walked outside. A faint fragrance drifted around Han Shao when she passed him. She opened her mouth after arriving in front of the door. Let's go and attend the banquet now. Following behind Phoebe, Han Shao got into a carriage that had long since been prepared. Two journeyman swordsmen were acting as groomsmen and spurring the horses on into the distance. Where are we going? Han Shao couldn't help but open his mouth with a question when he saw that Phoebe was sitting in the carriage, seemingly thinking of something. The finance minister of the empire is holding a banquet and has invited several notable business people in the empire. It's a meeting of the business people and a good timing to discuss business. Phoebe looked at Han Shao and opened her mouth to explain. Starting, Han Shao said, then isn't that Lawrence's father's banquet? Eh? How do you know that Lawrence is the son of the finance minister of the empire? Phoebe was a bit surprised and asked Han Shao with confusion. Lawrence and I have a good friendship. We're both from the academy. We've also had a few transactions before, so of course I know a few things about him. Han Shao didn't tell Phoebe that Lisa had been the one to tell him about Lawrence. He spoke matter-of-factly, making it seem that the two of them had close relations. Phoebe didn't suspect a thing as she nodded. So this is the case. I hadn't known that you were close to my senior brother. This rather surprises me. The two of them chatted about Lawrence afterwards. It was mostly Han Shao taking the chance to ask questions and Phoebe responding. Contrary to Han Shao's expectations, Phoebe didn't know much about Lawrence. She only knew that he was the son of the empire's finance minister, and although they had the same master, the two of them didn't meet much. According to Phoebe's words, Lawrence didn't seem to be one who focused on training martial techniques. He spent more time studying random things with their teacher than martial techniques, so it was no wonder that Lawrence's martial skill wasn't that extraordinary. Phoebe was unsure about more of Lawrence's matters. She only knew that he dealt with people well and had a good relationship with their teacher. Lawrence was also a bit resourceful and seemed to have many secrets about him, but Phoebe was uncertain of that as well. The two of them had unknowingly arrived at their destination as they chatted. It wasn't until when Han Shao got off from the carriage that he discovered they weren't too far away from the palace. Alighting from the carriage with Phoebe and walking to the door of a luxurious opulent manor, there was a well-mannered butler long since awaiting to welcome Han Shao and Phoebe inside. They made their way through a corridor and arrived in a courtyard surrounded by artificial mountains and rivers. They discovered that all sorts of soft and comfortable chairs had been placed in the surroundings with many exquisite sweet delicacies and fine wine set up in the plains around the artificial mountains. People dressed in extravagant clothing were scattered in all areas, grasping wine glasses in their hands and conversing with a smile on their faces. When Han Shao and Phoebe walked in, the stunning Phoebe immediately drew hot-eyed stares from many gentlemen within the area, as well as some envious glances from some noble ladies. "Hello Phoebe, I'm very happy that you could come and participate in this time's banquet." An ordinary-looking middle-aged man with normal features called out softly from the grass next to the flowing waters, walking over with a smile. "Uncle Evie, how would Phoebe not dare attend an event that you've issued an invitation for?" Phoebe tugged on Han Shao and walked in the direction of Finance Minister Evie of the Lancelot Empire. Evie Agati was the father of Lawrence Agati. Han Shao stared at Evie, observing him closely and marveling at how Evie could sire such a handsome son as Lawrence given his own ordinary features. He felt it truly incredible. "Is this handsome young fellow your boyfriend?" Evie looked at Han Shao with a smile and asked in surprise when he saw Han Shao standing by her side. "Yes Uncle Evie, he's called Brian and he's also quite close with senior brother Lawrence." Phoebe nodded and responded with a smile. She purposefully drew close to Han Shao as they talked and reached out a hand to take his wrist, speaking with a look of happy contentment. Although he knew that Phoebe was doing so to purposefully prove their relationship to Evie, Han Shao still felt something odd in his heart when Phoebe held onto him so intimately. "Oh, so this is the case. Hey, Lawrence has returned from school today as well and is changing into his evening wear. I think he'll be out in a bit. You can have a nice chat later." Evie spoke with surprise and then smiled at Han Shao and Phoebe. "I'm a bit busy today and need to attend to other guests. I'm afraid I'll have to leave you for now." "No worries Uncle Evie, go attend to what you need to do," Phoebe said graciously with politeness. Evie had just left when a middle-aged man with a protruding belly walked towards Phoebe with a glass of wine in his hand. The man suddenly saw Han Shao standing next to Phoebe before he'd reached her, and his face immediately darkened, but he covered it quite well. "It's been a few days, but Miss Phoebe is as beautiful and enchanting as ever. I don't know if you've considered the matter that I brought up to you last time." When the person reached Phoebe, his ardent gaze stared at Phoebe without abandon as he spoke in question. "Apologies Mr. Cameron, our Boost Merchant Guild is not willing to join your merchant guild." Phoebe's face resumed its cold expression as she flicked a glance at Cameron, speaking diffidently. Cameron's face changed as he stared deeply at Phoebe, saying, "Our merchant guild exists to oppose the Brute Merchant Alliance. As members of the Brute Merchant Alliance, the McGrady Guild seems to pose quite a threat to your Boost Merchant Guild. I hope you can seriously consider my proposal." "Hello Mr. Cameron. Who are you talking to?" A familiar voice suddenly sounded from behind as a curvaceous and alluring Emily, all dressed up, suddenly appeared behind Han Shao. Her facial expression had been relaxed and carefree when it suddenly changed after she caught sight of Han Shao when her body was turned. When her gaze landed on Phoebe holding onto Han Shao's arm, her eyes danced even more as a weird look focused fixedly on Han Shao. Chapter 135, Giving tit for tat. Han Shao received even more of a fright. He never thought that he'd run into Emily here. There was no way he could explain the fact that Phoebe's hand was wrapped around his arm. "This beautiful lady is the master of the Boost Merchant Guild." Cameron's expression grew a bit reserved when he saw Emily appear, and he spoke up politely. Emily's gaze was still focused on Han Shao at this moment, and she only recollected herself after Cameron started speaking. She flicked a glance at Phoebe, who stood to the side, saying faintly, "So you're Miss Phoebe." "This is Madame Emily. She's of the Empire's Betteridge family. Her husband is the second son of the head of the Betteridge family, Mr. Han." Cameron looked at Phoebe and cast some light on Emily's identity for her. The Betteridge family was a large family in the Empire, renowned for producing famous generals for the Empire. The Betteridge family had achieved many distinguished accomplishments for the Empire over the years, with Master Han now retired at home due to his advanced age. However, No one dared question his influence in the military. When she heard that Emily was of the Betteridge family, Phoebe's eyes lit up and she gave a friendly bow greetings to Madam Emily. You're too polite. This young fellow is quite handsome. Is he your boyfriend? Emily had lost her composure earlier but had fully recovered by now. She chuckled and stared at Han Shao in inquiry. Phoebe had felt that Emily seemed to keep flicking glances at Han Shao, but she didn't think much of it when she heard that Emily was already married. Now that she heard Emily's question, she immediately tightened her grasp on Han Shao's arm and smiled. That's right, his name is Brian. Hello beautiful Madam Emily, pleased to meet you. Han Shao reached out a hand politely and wanted to shake hands with Emily. It's very nice to meet you. You're very much like one of my friends. An odd smile clung to the corners of Emily's mouth. She stretched out her hand and clasped Han Shao's but suddenly exerted pressure when their hands met as her fingers dug fiercely into the back of Han Shao's hand that was facing the ground. A wry smile suddenly appearing on his face. Han Shao knew that Emily was definitely doing this on purpose. He grimaced and revealed a pained expression. Emily's expression didn't change but was obviously in a better mood after getting her revenge. She relaxed her hand and flicked a glance at Han Shao and Phoebe, saying diffidently, I need to go somewhere else for now. Can I chat with you later? Of course, Phoebe agreed happily. Nodding, Emily sashayed away. She suddenly turned her head back halfway and viciously threw a look at Han Shao when Phoebe and the others weren't paying attention. She made a subtle come hither motion behind her back. I'm going to the restroom. Han Shao understood Emily's meaning and leaned against Phoebe, whispering in her ear. He then extracted his arm from Phoebe's and left. He made a circle first and then walked past a corridor, sneaking towards a pavilion. Han Shao's vision could clearly pick up traces of Emily's path even without use of the original demons. He avoided some people along the way and made for an artificial mountain that was a bit out of the way. He'd just entered the artificial mountain when a shadow suddenly walked out from the gloom, giving Han Shao's waist a firm pinch. The person spoke angrily next to Han Shao's ear in a low voice. How come you never told me that you actually have a girlfriend? Han Shao didn't even need to think to know that it was Emily. He turned the hand back on her and held her tightly, pushing her flush against the artificial mountain and running his hand over her purred bottom. His other hand clasped around her waist and kissed down on her brilliantly red lips. Ooh! Emily struggled twice and pounded furiously on Han Shao's chest. She couldn't stop his invasion, however, and her own body slowly began to grow hot and go limp. Emily was wearing a brown evening dress today. The long tapering dress clung tightly to her mesmerizing body figure. The curvaceous evening dress was tight on the bottom as it enclosed around Emily's long slender legs. It looked like the bottom half of a mermaid, further enhancing the body's slenderness. Breasts that looked like they were about to burst out of their fabric and a well-rounded pert bottom were firm and toned. They were also completely accessible beneath the dress and left nothing to one's imagination, sending out a strong allure. When she sashayed, Emily sent alluring beams of beauty all over, appearing to be an incomparably beautiful woman. Han Shao had noticed that many men present were looking at Emily with a completely distracted look, staring so hard that it seemed their eyes were about to fall out. Speak, what's with it, Phoebe? After they were done, Emily bit off her words while she helped Han Shao clean up. Basking in his freedom from inhibitions and lying back comfortably with closed eyes, Han Shao leaned on the artificial mountain and explained about the matters between him and Phoebe. Emily's face warmed a little afterwards but didn't let Han Shao entirely off the hook. She suddenly naughtily grabbed Han Shao's lower body and said huffily, Phoebe, that little chit looked so natural with her hand around your arm just now. She didn't look like she was pretending at all. I think things aren't that simple between the two of you. His little brother having been caught, Han Shao exclaimed in surprise. He hastily straightened his pants and breathed a sigh of relief, explaining mischievously, all right, don't be jealous. We really don't have that kind of relationship. Brian, are you here? I'm looking for you. The original demons detected Lawrence calling out loudly and approaching this area at this time. Damn it, what's he doing here? Han Shao felt a shiver of horror as he and Emily hastily adjusted their clothing, anxiety written over their faces. Lawrence seemed to know that Han Shao was here as he yelled and walked in this direction. When Lawrence was almost where they were, Han Shao pointed in another direction and said to Emily, leave in that direction now. Emily was also in complete disarray right now as she hiked up her dress and stumbled into a run out of there. When Lawrence finally showed himself, he laughed merrily. "I was asking people where you were and the butler said he saw you walk in this direction." "You were indeed. Here." "Eh, who's that?" Lawrence spoke with a smile when he saw Han Shao and then suddenly caught a glimpse of Emily's back disappearing in another direction. He immediately exclaimed softly in surprise and looked at Han Shao with a look of confusion. "No, nothing." "Eh, no, I don't know." Han Shao had finally gotten everything in order and was privately cursing Lawrence as a bastard. He stammered a bit incoherently when he opened his mouth. Lawrence's facial expression was a bit odd as he took a few glances at Han Shao, suddenly saying, "I just heard Phoebe say that you're her boyfriend and was about to come find you for a good chatting. I happened to see a woman leave. Are you going behind my junior sister's back and coming here to rendezvous with another woman?" "Ha ha, how is that possible? You must have seen incorrectly or someone happened to walk by." Han Shao glossed things over and then changed the topic with a solemn face, saying to Lawrence, "How do you plan on proceeding with regards to Clark?" Seeming to see through Han Shao's purposeful attempt to change the subject, Lawrence looked oddly at Han Shao and didn't continue asking him. He said with a smile, "My father is holding the banquet today and you're attending as a guest. You should thoroughly enjoy yourself. Let's not talk about such dirty tasks." Lawrence's words happened to fall in line with Han Shao's thoughts. He walked out with a faint smile. "All right then, let's go back to the banquet hall." Nodding, Lawrence didn't say much else as he left the area with Han Shao walking back to the banquet hall. A melodious song had started sounding at some point as many of the guests outside had entered a large lobby. Some of these people started dancing gracefully in the rises and falls of the music. Those without partners or without interest stood around the outskirts by themselves. Off in the distance, Phoebe's expression appeared quite irritated as she impatiently dealt with Cameron's conversation. There was another madam standing next to Cameron wearing a disdainful cold smile on her face. She seemed to be saying something to Phoebe that made her facial expression become uglier and uglier. "What's going on?" Han Shao asked Phoebe with a frown when he and Lawrence walked over. "Oh, this little thing is your boyfriend?" Hey, he's just an ordinary student at the Babylon Academy of Magic and Force. How would he measure up to Mr. Cameron's wealth?" "Oh, are you paying for this little thing's tuition?" "It'd be very interesting that way." This older lady was wearing luxurious clothing and adorned in brilliant jewels, seemingly deathly afraid that people wouldn't know that she had money. Her features were middling but her body was curvy to the point of being over the top. She rather appeared a bit bloated. "Eh, who's this old granny?" Han Shao flicked a surprised glance at this older lady when he walked over and exclaimed to Phoebe, "PFFT." Phoebe covered her mouth and couldn't help but laugh. Her face then regained its composure as she said, "She's Madame Valerie of Lilan Garments." "Impudent thing, with which eye did you see an old granny?" Valerie was beyond incensed as she placed her hands on her hips and glared at Han Shao. Pointing at his left eye, Han Shao said, "This left eye." He then pointed at his other eye and continued, "This right eye." A trace of a delighted smile curved Phoebe's eyes as she came over to tenderly hug Han Shao's arm, saying to Valerie, "He's just this blunt. I'm truly sorry." As a sword master, Phoebe's own strength was unquestionable. However, she wasn't adept at verbally sparring with others and couldn't bear to let go of her face to do so. With Han Shao at her side kicking things off, however, she didn't mind going with the flow and adding fuel to the fire. "Old granny, you're already at an advanced age. You should be staying at home and enjoying the little bit of time you have left. What are you doing in the outside world putting your face out there?" In addition, the difference in our ages is simply too great to the point of being unable to communicate. If you're truly that lonely, you should find someone similar to your age to communicate with. Han Shao ignored Valerie's anger and mocked viciously. He then pointed at someone in front and said, "There, you should communicate with that whole gentleman over thing. You can flirt with him and maybe experience some old love." There was an elder man with white hair holding a cane in the direction that Han Shao was pointing in. He was sitting on a chair not too far away and slowly drinking wine. Valerie took a look at the old man and was so angry that her cheeks were red. The two meatballs in front of her chest swayed back and forth as she turned to stare at Han Shao, angrily unsure of what to say. Following Han Shao's gaze, Cameron, Phoebe and Lawrence looked at the old man at the same time. Phoebe laughed lightly and pinched Han Shao covertly, seeming to admonish him for making fun of the elderly. Cameron looked at the old man and turned his head, telling Valerie in a low voice to not be angry. However, When Lawrence looked at the old man, his facial expression suddenly changed as he was a bit shocked and taken aback. He finally revealed an odd wry smile. "Little fellow, I heard you were talking crap about me from afar." The old man suddenly turned at this moment and looked at Han Sha-Oh with bright piercing eyes, speaking with a resonant carrying voice.